right. Welcome back to the Literally Nothing Matters podcast with your host, Caitlin Osborne, and
No, the host, Chad, with the guest host, Caitlin.
guest host, Charles Osborne. Mandy is celebrating her wedding, so we are so excited to have Chazzy Boy on today. I think he's excited too. So we're going to get into kind of a different type of conversation today. We're going to talk about his career as a lobsterman and the fishing industry. Just because it's kind of a fascinating conversation. It's much bigger than you probably think it's going to be. So I'm excited to jump in and answer some questions that he gets on the rip. But before we do that, we're going to start with our Rose and Thorn.
You got to get this segment sponsored.
So guest, I know we have the choice to put ads in, and I'm like, I just don't have the time to
You get a flower company sponsored by.
Yeah, reach out, DM us. Let's start with our thorn and end with our rose. We always start with our rose and end with our thorn. I don't know why. It's not a good strategy. So thorn first. Go for it.
I'm not ready for wintertime.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I'm ready for it to cool down because I don't like it when it's wicked hot and stuff. But it got kind of all of a sudden the mornings going up to the boat. I still wear shorts until Thanksgiving, but it's starting to get a little nippy out, and I'm just not ready to concede and put pants on and do that whole thing. So that's probably the thorn. Even though I love fall, but I'm the cold days, I'm not ready for them yet.
Snapping on it.
Yeah.
Especially because we were just up in Vermont where it's just colder. So,
yeah.
All right, that's a good one. My thorn is that I have baby brain already.
Yeah, that's
18 weeks in, and I feel like I'm talking and then I'm just losing my train of thought. Chad and I were just kind of going over the series of what we want this to look like. And I'm like, wait, what? Just asking the same question over and over again. And I feel like I can't process things. So forgive me. We'll get through it together. But that is it's always a frustrating thing because you're like, I'm here, I'm present, but what the hell's going on? So that's my thorn.
All right.
So just bear with me.
Early onset dementia, but it's all right.
We all have our vices. All right, Rose.
My rose is this last weekend and seeing all of our friends together for Amanda and Mark. And I mentioned it to a couple people, and it hit me that they are the last group of our friends to get married. And that's it's happy that we're all there and we've been through everybody's wedding, but it's also sad that it's the last one.
That's so weird.
Because we have a big group of friends. There's probably 7 or 8 of the girl, maybe more. I don't know. It's worth 2 or 3 tables at a wedding, if you put it that way, with all the boys and stuff too. And we always have a good time. We take over at least a quarter or half of the dance floor. And
Chad takes up the whole dance floor.
Yeah, no, but it's it was fun to be able to celebrate that and have it be with Mark and Amanda up in BT.
Yeah, me and Amanda are going to hop on this week, and we're going to kind of give a synopsis of how her wedding went. But brief, it was insanely perfect. It was exactly, if you just put Amanda, if you embody her in an event, this was what it was. It was just beautiful and easygoing, carefree, and it just came out perfect. So I don't want to spill the beans because that's her job, but oh my gosh, it was amazing. Literally nothing went wrong.
Yeah, no, it was perfect.
So my rose, other than this beautiful wedding, is that our puppy Oscar, who, if you've listened before, we learned that he had heart arrhythmia a while back, and he was in for testing for EKGs and all this wild veterinarian crap. And we have found a good medication for him. He's taking it 3 times a day, so that's challenging because he's taking it at 10 a.m., 6 p.m., and 2 a.m. So Chad's waking up at 2 a.m. regardless of if he's going to work or not. But he went to the vet and he's looking much better. He still has, I think, double beats or whatever they call it, but he was having triple.
It's like his own drum line,
He marches to his own beat, that one, I'll tell you. But it's just, pets are so special, and I feel like until you have a baby, they're just your babies, and they definitely are and were ours. And then when they get sick, it's like your heart kind of breaks a little bit. And definitely where he was, I was scared, but he's doing so good. He's lost some weight. He looks like a little pup. So I'm happy to report Oscar Dog, the dumpster dog, is still alive and kicking and growling at little kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Except for Annie. He's actually way good with Annie. So
There it is.
there it is.
The end. See you guys next week.
All right. So we're going to get into Chad's career. So like I mentioned before, he is a lobsterman slash fisherman slash seaman. That sounds so weird. I don't like that.
I'm a big seaman.
He's a big seaman.
I'm a big swimmer.
Oh my god. So I want to kind of get into questions that he gets whenever he tells people that that's what he does for a career. He always gets bombarded and they're like, I think this might be stupid, but, and then it just always gets into a huge conversation. And he doesn't, I want to say something nice about you. He can talk to anyone. He's very personable. And so often his conversations turn into large segments. So we're just going to answer it here for you. So the first thing I want to start with is when someone says, what do you do for a career? What do you say?
Like, I think the generic term would just be fisherman. That kind of is like anybody that catches anything that comes out of the ocean. And then the person's follow-up question, like, I don't know, 9.9 times out of 9 would be like, oh, like on Wicked Tuna? And I'm like, geez, no. And I'm like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, my blood's just like boiling a little bit. Like those guys are just sitting there, smoking some dope, drinking some beers, waiting for a fish to swim by the boat. Maybe they reel it in, maybe they don't. I don't know. But then I'm like, oh, have you guys ever seen Deadliest Catch? And they're like, oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm like, all right, well, that's what we do, just on the East Coast instead of up in Alaska. And they're like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. But it's hard because I think like a lot of people, like you drive by like a construction site, you see somebody building a house, and it's like you understand the steps involved in doing it, where for the most part, people love eating seafood, whether it's lobster, fish, scallops, whatever you guys might enjoy, because it is, a healthy alternative. But it doesn't really dawn on you that nobody really knows how it happens, because nobody's ever been on a boat to actually go out and do it. So it's kind of
and it seems so simple when you're like, oh, I'm a lobsterman, and it's like, oh, cool, you just go out and like catch a lobster in a cage.
Yeah, and they're like, how many traps do you have? They're like 800, and then there's like
how big's your boat?
Yeah, there's a storm that's coming, and they're like, oh, so do you like bring your traps out every day? And I'm like, you think I could put 800 like everybody's? I would assume like most people know what a lobster trap
What
looks
are some
like.
quick facts? How big is the boat?
So our boat's 65 feet.
What's its name?
It is named the witch. No, Caitlin Christine.
So funny. Thank you. Where is it docked?
So it's up in Gloucester. So it's tied to a dock. It's too big to put on a mooring down here in Marblehead. So I got to tie it to a pier up in Gloucester.
What are your hours?
Tomorrow morning I'm waking up at 1:30, and I'll probably be home hopefully before Annie goes to bed.
At 7.
Yeah.
That's not normal, by the way. Most fishermen don't work those hours. Chad just has an addiction to this. We're working through it, but it's a problem.
Hey, like my saying goes, if you're gonna be a bear, you might as well be a grizzly.
Yeah. Go big or go.
You're not gonna make it in the fishing industry if you're gonna be a little panda bear, a little small bear.
I love it. Okay, cool. So that's kind of your career.
Yeah.
All right. So then the next question that we often stumble upon with people are when they start to talk about like did you answer what kind of fish you catch?
So like right now, like lobster and Jonah crab. So you could find both of those at kind of your local markets. In the past, I've done all kinds of fish, haddock, cod, halibut, that kind of stuff. Scalloping.
A fun thing that we didn't talk about before, but sharks. Have you caught a shark?
I have caught a few sharks.
Have you caught a great white?
I have caught a great white.
Are they in our waters?
I wouldn't go swimming around here.
Shocking, guys.
Yeah.
If you have to ask, just they're there.
Yeah.
It's their home. Like, what do you expect?
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't get the big
Yeah,
thing.
no, I think it's like people. It's I mean, Shark Week and everything else. It's like They're definitely cool. I mean, that's like something that, and some like a orca, killer whale, stuff like that. Even the big whales, like that stuff. That still doesn't matter how many times I've seen them. That they're like, wow, that's pretty sick.
And usually the sharks are alive when you catch them, right?
Yeah,
Like we
yeah,
caught the great white and it was alive.
yeah. The biggest one we caught was like a 10-footer, and I thought it was dead. And I reached over. They got all the nerve endings in their nose, so I touched its nose to get the net out of its mouth, and it bit the tip of my glove off. So it almost got me. But yeah, that thing swam away, and it wasn't that far away from shore. Maybe 7 miles or something like that. So yeah, and, if you see seals, I wouldn't be in the water.
All right, cool. So then what we like to talk about often is people say, so I go to the grocery store and I see all these different options. I really, really love salmon. I love all of these types of foods. Like, what's the best thing? And then you kind of get into this whole like, all right, well, now there's wild caught versus farm raised. So give the synopsis on those two definitions.
So you go to your fish market or you go to your favorite restaurant. There's salmon, Faroe Island salmon. It makes it sound, real sexy.
Faroe Island?
Faroe Island.
Where
yeah,
is that?
It's I think it's up by like Iceland or something,
Okay.
or North Canada. I don't know, somewhere up in colder water. Not around here, but it's where they have all the fish farms. So that's why it's called that.
Marketing, I'll get you.
Yeah, and so I've been slowly educating, out of all people, Amanda, because she loves her salmon. But about asking, the salmon on the menu, is it wild caught or is it farm raised? Because there is a big difference if kind of you look at what goes into farm raised fish. When I started kind of drilling this into Amanda's head, and it's all personal choice, like it's anything. Like if you want to eat a piece of steak and you want to find out where it comes from, that's great. If you don't, that's okay too. It's just kind of educating yourself into.
No, it's not okay. It's absolutely not okay. It is such a pet peeve of mine, and I should have started this conversation by saying I am a vegetarian, and the sole reason is because I'm obsessed with animals. And it is so disturbing the fact that people do not understand where their food, especially their meats and seafoods, are coming from.
Yeah.
And I feel like educate yourself just a little bit, and I get just wanting to like put blinders on because like I do that with some foods that I eat that are processed, but it is so important. And it's like if you don't care about the animal, like to each their own. I understand some people just like don't give a shit, and that's your own opinion, but it's like think about how stressed out these animals are, whether it's a fish in a farm or a cow in a barn that's never seen the light of day and is just literally surviving off of like paper. And then they're stressed out because they have their baby calf and it gets dragged away from them and they're literally like bleeding from their udders. And then they're stressed out, so they're secreting all these hormones just like these fish are in fish farms. And then what's happening to these stress hormones? They're just going in their body, and then you're butchering the animal. Guess where that's going? It's going in your body.
Yeah.
And we wonder why we're so stressed out. We wonder why we have all these crazy diseases. So it's definitely worth at least knowing about.
Yeah, and it's just and then it's like you can kind of understand the choices. You have choices, I guess, is the better way to put it. I'm never going to tell somebody what to eat or what not to eat, but it's like you have more choices than just what's right in front of you. Where the other fish that is heavily farm raised is tilapia, and you can find that at Market Basket, Whole Foods, even or sometimes they'll have like tacos at restaurants because it's very cheap on the wholesale side of it. But what happens is a lot of it comes over from Asia, and in these buildings they got fish farms and chicken farms all in the same building. So they have all these big swimming pools that obviously filled with water. That's where the fish are. Above the swimming pools, they have chicken wire, like a wire grate, and then on that wire grate sits the chicken farm. So what they do is they only feed the chickens. So then the chickens eat the chicken food, they poop into the water, and then that's what these tilapia end up eating. And they're so jacked up on antibiotics and growth hormones to try to get them to grow so big so fast and then bring them to market that people have taken the meat and biologists have tested it, and it's like genetically not even like fish, and it's like one of those. It's just kind of all around just gross, and it's just you think about what the water looks like, and like literally just that's whatever they're eating is then going into the meat that then you're ended up eating, and it's kind of one of those. Oh wow, I can go get fish because fish is healthy, so I should eat that. And wow, look, I can go. Tilapia is only $4.99 a pound instead of $20 a pound for codfish or something like that. That's locally wild caught. So I'm going to get this tilapia because it's healthy. But then it's like, well, where the hell did this thing come from? So it's just kind of being aware and ask questions. Whether it's your fish market, the fish thing
on the menu at a restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, what kind of fish is it?
Like fish of the day. Like ask what fish.
Yeah, and ask like, oh, where did this come from? Because like the waitress might not be able to ask you, but the manager should definitely be able to come over and say, hey, this is where we got it from, or
I feel like if it's not on the menu, like just if it's not kind of marketed,
it's
probably not a great fish.
Unless it says like haddock or call some of the local species that you might find in the local waters, it's probably kind of a cheaper thing, but it's not all equal. And the same thing like salmon, the wild caught salmon in Alaska versus the farm raised stuff. You look at the meat on a wild caught fish, it's like deep, almost red, orangey, like so much color involved. And then you look at a farm raised fillet and it's pale, there's a little bit more whiter, like a light orange or, kind of like that, where it doesn't have the same kind of nutrients. And a lot of these fish farms, because there's so many fish in such a small area, even the ones that, they have fish farms out in the ocean. So it's like a giant net that the water can flow in and out of, but there's so much fish in a small area, they get infested with like sea lice and some things. So they they take these fish and they dip them into this chemical to kill the lice, because the lice gets into the gills and they can't breathe well. So it's they got to de-lice the fish and then put them back into these fish farms. And it's just kind of like there's a lot of stuff that goes into
like dipping the fish in like a chemical, right?
Yeah, no, it's like just almost sterilize the fish to kill off. It's the same thing as well. Like if you might spray like a pesticide to kill bugs in your yard or on your flowers, it's the same kind of thing. And jacking everything up with so many growth hormones, it's like then you end up eating it, and that's the whole argument of like how come little girls are becoming getting their cycles so early at such a young age, and like is the humans evolving, or is it all the crap that we're putting into our bodies that's jacked up on hormones and everything else that's changing the way that
they're just everywhere.
Yeah,
it's like scary, honestly, because you think of seafood as like a healthier alternative, and sometimes it's not.
Not at all. Yeah.
All right, so you kind of mentioned that there are some different options around here for when you are buying fish. So what are some wild caught options that you can kind of just like know are safe on a menu, and what different ones are good by season, if that's something?
Yeah, so like a lot of the wild caught stuff, there's like a lot of them, they'll have little tags that say wild caught USA versus wild caught Canadian, wild caught in another country or whatever. So wild caught USA, and then you can even ask them, hey, is this from New England? If you live in the area, if you live down by Aunt Debbie down in the Chesapeake, they have different fish down there. If you live on the West Coast, you have different local fish. So your fishmonger, the guy that works at the market, will be able to answer your specific questions. But you can even go into, hey, what's in season? Like right now in New England, it's kind of the tuna season for local tuna. So if you
Is it?
Yeah, so like summer and all the way through like Thanksgiving into December, it's like when they get it local. So it's like if you go and you're getting sushi, you're eating it raw. Do you want to eat something that's local that might have been caught a couple days before? Or if you're sitting there eating spicy tuna rolls in the middle of March, where's that fish coming from? Is it coming from Hawaii? Is it coming from South America? How far has that thing been traveling to get to your plate? It's just the more questions you can kind of ask, the more you can open your mind up into what you might want to put into your own body, or who do you want to support. A lot of lobsters come down from Canada, so we have such a strong lobster fishery and all through New England. why do you want to buy a Canadian lobster when it's alive, so it's not like it's dead for any longer, but now you're supporting the fishermen up in Canada as opposed to supporting some of the local guys around New England.
Screw
Canadians suck.
them. What do you order for fish when you go to a restaurant?
My favorite's codfish, personally. I just like if codfish they eat other fish. Some fish, like a haddock, eats more like worms and stuff in the mud. So to me, it's kind of a little bit softer. Codfish is a little bit firmer. So that's kind of my favorite for like a generic fish. If you're getting a little bit up in price, like halibut's really good, but you're getting a little bit pricier. You get a smaller portion. And so it's kind of like I'm so used to, I catch a codfish in the trap, bring it home. I can eat 3 pounds of fish for dinner. And, you guys are going to have to go to the fish market and spend $60 on it, where I'm getting it for free. So I'm kind of spoiled where I can eat as much as I want, not have to pay for it. So it's kind of, it can get pricey. I know that. So it's what you can afford or what you feel comfortable buying. So if you're gonna spend money on something, get something that is kind of what you want for humanely raised and or humanely caught.
So I've never had seafood in my life.
I've tried to trick her a couple of times.
We are a match made in pure heaven.
Yeah.
But one of my friends actually brought up the other day, she was like, isn't fish not supposed to smell fishy when you cook it? And if it does, isn't that a bad sign?
It's more when it's raw. Like if you cook, if you put fish in a pan and cook it, you're gonna get, a fish smell. But if like I fillet a fish and you put your nose up to it, because you are so anti-fish, you're gonna say, oh, it smells like fish. But it's not supposed to have a fishy kind of smell to it.
If it's raw.
Yeah, if you freeze a raw fish, usually it kind of brings out more of a fishy flavor, so you can kind of marinate it. A lot of times, like if I get some codfish and I vacuum seal it and freeze it, I'll put some like a Cajun spice or something on it to kind of cover it up a little bit. But raw fish, it doesn't have like a deep fish smell to it if it's fresh.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So now I want to slide on into the other portion of our conversation. So you got all the deets, you know what to order, go and get yourself some healthy options. Now I wanted to get into the beef, the drama llama
All right.
of fishing.
All right.
So Chad comes home every day and he's like, so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to give you a goddamn platform and you can talk your ear off, and people are going to love this side of it. Because it's a side of this industry that not a lot of people know about. A lot of times lobstermen get labeled as certain things, whether it's rough around the edges, which 100% of them are, whether it's they're most stubborn, which 100% of them are.
We all think we're the best at what we do and nobody's better than us. So it's, you kind of sit there and you're like, well, that guy's an asshole,
Yeah, they definitely are very similar, but they all think that they're super different. So anyways, so along those lines of you think that they're one way, a lot of times they're another way. So for example, Chad is my partner, and part of why we get along so well is because we're passionate about a lot of the same things. Like I had mentioned, I'm obviously annoyingly obsessed with animals and their welfare. And Chad actually is too.
Well, when I was a kid, like I've always had lobster traps and I've rode around like Marblehead Harbor and stuff, hauling them up by hand, like when I was a kid. But my first like real passion was like I wanted to be a marine biologist. And it's kind of funny when I was going to school for exercise science and all that stuff, where it was like my job, I'm like like I don't have a certificate or a diploma, but it's like I am a marine biologist where like, whether it's water temperature changes, depth changes, following these animals around the ocean and trying to catch them, it's funny to look back on, wow, I'm kind of doing what I wanted to do as a kid.
Yeah. So on that trajectory, you probably heard a lot about lobster being red listed, and it's kind of marketed that the waters are overfished and these lobstermen are just greedy and they're going in and they're tearing up our oceans and they're killing all of these animals just to kind of get a buck. And so I wanted to ask you kind of What's the deal behind that? Why do we know and hear so much about why lobster is like bad to eat, or like why we shouldn't be buying it and it's hurting our earth?
Yeah.
What's the truth behind that? Give me the
So
deets.
when it comes to what we bring to actual market compared to what we like, what comes up in the trap. So it's like I can only bring in a certain size lobster. So there's a gauge. So every lobster that comes on the boat, I gotta gauge it to make sure it meets a minimum size. So it's above a minimum size, but it's below a maximum size. So there's like a slot size that I can only keep. So everything else has to go overboard. But then also, if we catch a female lobster that has eggs, because that's breeding and making other baby lobsters, those all go overboard.
And you have to like mark them up.
Yeah, so you put a little notch in in one of the flippers on the tail, and that tells. So even next, like whenever the lobster sheds its egg, so it's kind of the same gestation period as a human. So at 9 months, like that lobster will have eggs on its tail. It then sheds the eggs. So you look at it, there's no eggs, I can keep it. Oh, but somebody's already notched it. So you got to throw that back overboard because it tells everybody this is a breeding female. So let's keep it in the population. So, if I bring in 1,000 pounds of lobster, I've probably thrown over, an additional 2,000 pounds of lobster, for that 1,000 lobsters I bring in.
Do you believe in the regulations? Do you think that there should be regulations for that?
Yeah, I got no problem with it. Either they've been talking about them making a gauge increase, so we're like the smallest size is going to be a little bit bigger, so we're going to have to keep a little bit bigger lobster. In my mind, I fish kind of a little bit farther outside, so I kind of see a little bit bigger lobsters anyway. And in my side, if I'm catching bigger lobsters, then the dealer should give us more money for them because it's better. It's a better product. So I wouldn't be opposed to it, but a lot of these smaller guys that you wish I was, they're back at home taking a nap at 1 o'clock, and we're just like only halfway done with the day.
Chad's not even out touring fishes yet.
Yeah, and so those guys, it hurt those guys more than it would end up hurting me, and kind of the way that I.
Well, is it good for the environment to do that, though? Do you think it's worth it?
There's arguments on both sides of it of you're just creating like a slot size. So then it's just kind of, and it's like you're kind of almost playing too much of like quote unquote like God with, you're only taking a certain, kind of only the males then end up getting taken out mostly.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of hard. It's I think there's a lot more lobsters around than, the scientists. They look in the same spots year after year after year, but these things got heads and brains and legs, and they're migrating all over the place. So is it all the freshwater runoff that we've had? Is it pesticides in people's lawns going into the runoff? Is that why there's not a lot of lobsters closer to shore, but now they're farther out to sea? So there's a lot more behind it than, there's not lobsters here that there was 10 years ago, so there must not be any lobsters around. But it's like,
that's overfished. Like that.
Yeah, they're like, overfishing, now we have to close it down, or now we have to change all these rules. And I'm like, I don't know about these guys, but I mean, we're doing pretty good where we're at. There's nobody around us. So it's like maybe if, other people, kind of change the mentality, maybe it'd be a little different. But don't tell anybody about that because that's my little secret.
So get back to that question though. So the red listing.
So last year there was the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which is based out of California. I think in the LA, San Diego, Southern California somewhere. And they said lobster is red listed because of it's overfished and such a high risk of, we'll get into this in a little bit, but with entanglements with an endangered whale. And all of a sudden, Whole Foods pulls all their lobster products off of their shelves. So you can't buy like lobster ravioli at Whole Foods. You can't buy live lobster at a lot of like Whole Foods or bigger supermarket chains. A lot of big restaurant chains. All right, no more. Same thing. We're not doing lobster mac and cheese at our steakhouse anymore.
And then it's in your face, like it's the lobstermen. They're overfishing.
Yeah. So the it's pointed at all the guys on the boats that are sitting here. We're all individual business owners just trying to go to work. And then all of a sudden you sit there and you're asking yourself, what the heck is going on? Like we're not doing anything. We're playing by the rules, and all of a sudden this privately owned company that has a lot of environmental groups that follow them, like all of a sudden they can just come out and say Chad sucks, and now all of a sudden the price of lobster drops by $1.50 or whatever last year. Now all of a sudden it's like all the gravy on top of it is like, cut right off the top, and you kind of ask yourself, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
But so one of the things is, if you guys might have heard, is the endangered right whale that comes into Cape Cod, Massachusetts waters, roughly February through May. And what we've done as an industry in Massachusetts, you can't have any lobster traps set in the state of Massachusetts between February 1st till May 15th ish, somewhere in that range. So there's no risk of entanglement. So they come in.
There's nothing in the water.
No, there's no buoys. Not one buoy can be in the water.
What would happen if you had a buoy in the water?
Oh, somebody I know, he had a buoy. He was sick the month of January, so he wasn't able to take his traps out in time. And he had a couple hundred, he had some traps left in the water, and they took his permit away for 2 years.
Yeah, so he could not.
Basically, he's out of business. Yeah, for 2 full years now.
So it's not like a slap on the wrist or like, okay, you owe $1,000. Like he has fines that probably $100,000.
Yeah,
he can't work.
Oh yeah, no, and it's like serious. So you're sitting there and you're abiding by it, and also from the buoy, there's a line that goes from the buoy. If you guys have been around the water, you'll see a colored buoy floating, and it says, whose buoy it is. And then there's a line that goes down to the first trap on the bottom. So every, 60 feet, we have to put in this little piece of rope that, it's a weak rope. So if a whale were to get entangled in it, even though there's no whales around when we're actually fishing, if a whale were to get entangled, the rope would break easy. So then it wouldn't get wrapped up, and then the whale could swim away. And then the state, along with the New England Aquarium, they do flyovers every day from February, as long as the weather's good. But they send airplanes over Massachusetts February through May until all the whales are gone. The right whales are gone. And then when all of them are gone, they can finally say, okay, now you guys can go set traps. So we look at it, and they red listed the quote unquote Maine lobster, but it's the same lobster we catch in New Hampshire or catch in Massachusetts or Rhode Island. It's all just American lobster. It's your traditional lobster. So when they red list the Maine lobster, the whole market of all of New England then takes a hit, even because they're all just kind of grouping us all together in one big group. So it is hard. I don't know if you guys might have heard of something like that, but it's not the fisherman side of it. We're doing all the things they're telling us to do to get the risk reduction down. There hasn't been a documented right whale death from an entanglement in any of the New England lobster gear in over 20 years. So at one point the population was real slim, like less than 100 whales. And then over the last 20 years, it's gone up to almost like 500 whales. And the last few years, it's kind of taken a little bit of a dip. And then that's where all of a sudden they're like, we have to do all these new things. And, basically from February to May, a lot of these guys are out of business. What I end up having to do is I have to go farther offshore. So instead of being able to stay and fish all winter, kind of a little bit closer to home, now I'm going out 30, 40, 50 miles to be able to still go fishing. So it's extra time, money spent in fuel, time away, from being at home because of these regulations. So it's kind of the trickle down effect of, somebody sits there and says, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then they don't really think about, well, we've been doing something good for the last 20, 25 years that the population's like tripled. So how come, we can't just keep doing the same thing? We have to then all of a sudden do all these drastic turnarounds that you're kind of looking at yourself. It doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, so they're saying that we are going to red list them because the lobsters, because the fishermen are overfishing them, and because they are harming these whales.
Yeah, right? So there's a risk that we could entangle a right whale.
Okay. So when you kind of dig further into that, so what do you see?
So the other thing that's going on in the lobster fishery is, if you guys have seen it on the news everywhere, these wind farms they're trying to put up offshore.
Bear with us. It sounds like it doesn't relate. It does.
Yeah. So a tangent, but it'll all circle back around. So the government from the, I think there's climate change and we have to figure out some sort of renewable energy, or at some point here we're screwed. But in my mind, putting windmills in the middle of the ocean, it just doesn't make sense on like multiple levels. Where there's been one in Gloucester, it broke 2 years ago, and the thing still hasn't gotten fixed, and that's on land.
And wasn't like part of the mill that like fell off?
Yeah, it
It's,
flew
like,
off into the
chilling.
woods. Yeah, and it was like you're sitting there, and it's been 2 years, and the thing's just sitting there. It's just a pole just sitting there now.
It's
So
like leaking fluid.
yeah, and it's like, so what happens when that thing's like 50 miles out in the ocean? Who the hell's gonna go fix that thing? But the other thing they got to do is, so to put one windmill in the ocean, they have to lay a footing or a slab of concrete along the bottom to hold it in there. They can't just plop it in the sand and hopefully it stays. But so each windmill needs a slab of concrete that's the size of a football field. So if you think about like 1,000 windmill wind farm would look like, that's 1,000 football fields of concrete on the ocean. So it's like, you're gonna tell me that I'm killing lobsters, or I'm killing fish, or I'm killing baby whales, but you're gonna sit there and do how many metric tons of concrete on the ocean floor and think that's not going to kill everything in sight? It's like mind-boggling that's good for the environment. But
Is that where you fish? Is that near where you fish?
yeah, so it's where I used to fish down, like they're doing it really,
Offshore?
really hard. No, down by like Rhode Island, Block Island, like where I fish in the shipping lanes going into south of Martha's Vineyard.
Okay.
That's where they're really pushing it. But now they're starting to come up into the Gulf of Maine, Massachusetts Bay, and then going up towards Maine. And so now what their whole idea is, you can go online and look at some of these maps that they have of where they're suggesting to put wind farms, and it's literally the entire coast. So in order to find the good spots for these wind farms, they have these boats, this last, 7-8 months now, have been just slowly going around on the bottom, and they got like the seismic blasting. So they send down this big seismic, sound wave to the bottom, and it bounces off the bottom back up to the boat, and it tells them if it's sandy, if it's muddy, if it's rocky, just to try to get them a good feel of like, all right, what's going to hold the concrete the most. So all of a sudden back in, January, February, all of a sudden down, especially down off of New Jersey, all these dead whales started washing up on beaches like every day, 2-3 whales washing up on the beach. And we're like, what's going on? There's no lobster gear in the water, so it's not the lobstermen. And we're sitting there and, la-di-da, we're calling NOAA, which is the regulation, board for the government. And they're saying, oh, there's nothing to see here. It's not, no problem. And then for the last like 6 months, constantly, another whale pops up. I think 1 or 2 of the endangered right whales popped up dead down off of Connecticut. And you're sitting there and you're like, how can you allow, what's going on? So what's happening is these sound waves are going down, and it's blowing these whales' eardrums right out of their head, and they don't know which way is up or down, and they end up drowning because they can't come up for air because their equilibrium from their inner ear, their cones and rods and everything are all messed up from the seismic blasting from the windmill boats. But the government won't blame them. And all of a sudden you sit there and you do a little bit of the digging, like Caitlin said. And so that Monterey Bay Aquarium out in California, it's privately owned, but then all of a sudden you start looking at the list of donors, and now it's a lot of these big windmill companies are donating millions of dollars to some place, out on the West Coast that's 4,000 miles away from anything that has to do with a New England lobster. And now what they're saying, that now it's on a red list, that now major supermarket and restaurant chains are now not buying lobsters. So now the price is going down, and you're sitting there and you're like, oh, wow, you start connecting the dots.
I wonder if Bezos is entangled in all of this too.
No, but it's like, you don't want to sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist or like some crazy, guy, but it's like all of a sudden you're like, what the hell is going on here? Everything's been fine as kind for how long? And now all of a sudden you're talking about these drastic regulations that could put the whole industry out of business. And I'm young enough and, I'm going to be doing this for long enough to support our family, monetarily, where it's like, these are real life impacts on our life that is going down.
But further than that, I mean, we are a splash in an ocean,
Yeah,
if that,
yeah.
a raindrop, if that. It's our world,
Yeah.
and we are just mutilating it. I think that's the bigger part of just we are literally putting concrete on the bottom of the ocean floor and killing anything in its wake.
Yeah, no. Instead of
that's not
putting like
even-
solar
no.
panels up on like walkways so people could, walk. Like
There's something with solar panels too that aren't good.
No, but, all right, but it's like there's enough smart people out there that it's like putting something in the middle of the ocean just because you don't see but you just see the waves. You don't see what's on the bottom. I look at the ocean and I think of like, oh, what does the bottom look like and what's crawling around on the bottom, instead of just like, wow, the wave's cool. So it's easy for people to kind of not realize what the impact could be. Like I've met the state rep on a Memorial Day thing, and I'm trying to set up a meeting time to talk with him. But something, do your own research. Don't just listen to me, but kind of start looking at some of the windmill stuff, and call your state reps and ask like, what's going on here, because it's got to impact. If any of you guys live along the coast, and then, what's next, because this isn't going to be something that it's going to solve our climate issue. So it's like, what the hell are these guys going to try to come up with next?
Well, it's like, and then it breaks and it's leaking into the ocean. I'm more worried about the chemicals that are getting into our oceans from that thing.
Yeah, no, it's just like they're trying to come up with a solution, but they're not looking at what the impact is going to be as a whole. And in my mind, it's a negative overall. For what little electricity that you're going to get out of it, it's going to be way overwhelmed by the ecological impact, the damage that you're doing to the seacoast.
So I think we circled back, right?
Yeah, no, I think so. It's just like fish. It's not. Oh, another thing that's kind of like that. I don't want to say fake news and fall into that crazy group of people.
Fake news.
But no, more like the different agendas that you kind of see sliding, and you got Caitlin hears it from me, like she said, every day. But it's like there was
and I'm the first person to be like, listen, I heard that you guys were being mean to this and that, and I'm like making sure that he's following every single regulation.
Yeah.
He comes home and he's like, yeah, one of my friends got really screwed because like he made a mistake into this, and I'm like, good, he can't be making mistakes.
Yeah.
Like, this is why we have rules. This is why there's regulations. Like, I care more about the welfare of the environment and the animals out there than this one person that, oh my God, no, well, he's the one that effed up. Sorry.
But yeah, so there's a Netflix documentary out that I kind of got into almost a heated discussion with somebody when we're like up
No,
to.
you didn't. You kept your cool.
Yeah, no, I did. I was ready to get mad, but it was like a friend in the girl group that was like an extra. Like, I'm not somebody that I've been out with a bunch. So if it was Amanda, I would have been like, listen, dude, like that's not what it's. I was keeping my cool. But she brings up this Netflix documentary. I think Overfished or something like that. And it's like, no, you guys, and she like directed it at me like, you guys are the ones that are doing all this bad stuff. And I started looking into it, and the whole documentary, they don't like.
So what is the documentary? What does it depict?
So it depicts that like all the oceans are being so overfished, depleted of all the.
And it shows some pretty gruesome scenes. I could not watch it, but I have heard that they show pictures and imagery of people like hunting dolphins and just taking whatever they can take from the ocean, and like really bloody scenes.
Like you drag it out of the bottom, and you're keeping whatever the hell comes on the boat, and you're going to find a market for it somewhere. It just turns out that all these things that they're depicting are all over in a lot of these Asian countries that have like zero regulations, like big boats in Japan and Taiwan and stuff. They still hunt whales, like it's, Herman Melville, Moby Dick days, like that kind of stuff. And
that's the sad part too, where it's like all of these animals don't just stay in one place. Like even the right whales, I have no idea about what their trajectory is throughout the world, but like that's the only one I can think about. We're doing the right thing, but what are they doing when they then migrate to the South or wherever the hell they end up. It's like it's such a bigger picture than what we see sometimes.
No, and that's where like the U.S. fisheries were like the most regulated industry in the entire country, like over like coal mining, over oil drilling, like, all these things that like you need like major regulatory action to protect people. But the United States fishermen that are like, most of them are mom and pop small boat fishing, that we're just, you know, going up, we're all doing the right thing, because why am I going to screw myself over for my, you know, my future? If I scratch all the lobster eggs off of a female so I can keep it, I'm not going to have lobsters in 7 years to be able to catch, you know? So that's where you're sitting there, and it's, you know, certain things you might see, you got to ask yourself, all right, well, where is this, you know? Or, you know, is it, you know, people that I know locally, or, you know, is it in other countries, or kind of, well.
And it goes back to that conversation of like, stop getting this cheap fish, because guess where that's coming from? These markets that are butchering things, like they are just particles in the air.
Yeah. No, if it's like imported from Thailand, you know, same thing, shrimp, where it's just like, all right, where, you know, you get your Gulf of Mexico shrimp or whatever down in the South, but it's like, you like shrimp, and then all of a sudden this product of Thailand, or, you know, or Indonesia.
Oh, do they do that?
Oh yeah, that's where most of the shrimp comes from, is over in Asia. Yeah. And so it's like, all right, well, where the hell is this coming from? Is it farm raised and it's coming from Thailand? It's like, oh boy, have fun eating that shrimp cocktail, you know?
Yeah, shrimp's interesting. Is it like considered a fish?
Shellfish. So it's in like the crustacean. It's like a lobster in the lobster family. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to that documentary, it was just, it's sad to watch, and you're like, oh my God, you were doing all of this, but it's not them whatsoever.
No, they're like spinning it where they're not saying it's us, but they're not saying it's us. You know, there could have been a very fine line of like, yeah, we have strong regulations in the United States, and kind of backed the local fishermen, but they don't say it. So just the average, you know, uneducated person in this, like, that doesn't know, like, you don't know what you don't know. So it's, you're just kind of assuming, oh, wow, yeah, all fishermen are assholes.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, they are.
Some of them.
Oh my gosh. All right.
So, all right, well, I got to wake up in a couple hours.
Are you ready to get off your pedestal? Do you feel good?
No, I was tired. Now I'm all fired up again. So probably going to have to pop a couple melatonin to get me to sleep, because I got to wake up in a couple hours.
I think we hit everything.
I think so.
Is there anything else you wanted to mention?
No, if you guys have any other questions, like I always say, send me that postcard, carrier pigeon, Facebook Messenger, you know, or send a couple questions to these guys. And I got no problem. I would love to kind of have this be an open discussion with you guys, whether directly to me, if you can find me on the Ancient Book. Or
Chad's obsessed with Facebook. Like any time of day, he's just on Facebook.
No,
watching videos.
No, I'm not. But or if you want to ask it through them, and kind of, you know, I have no problem kind of guiding you guys, at least what my views are of it. If you want to have a back and forth, well, I think that, what about this idea? You know, because I talk to people that make the rules, and I'm trying to kind of be a voice in the fishery of like, what you guys decide is going to impact me. So I support the whole, you know, there's plenty of, you know, room for us to make a living and all these animals to coexist. And so I have no problem being in a discussion on any side of it with you guys.
Yeah.
Unless you tell me that I'm a tuna fisherman, and then I'm not going to have I'm not going to have any time for you and the wicked tuna guys.
Yeah.
Pricks.
Oh my gosh, I can't. Yeah. All right. Cool. That's all she wrote.
All right. Well, third time on here, so let me know when you guys want me back.
All right. See you guys later.
All right. Later.